Thank you all so much for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. I know I've gotten some new followers on both my platforms, and I just want to briefly introduce myself. My name is Tonya Carter, and I'm a relationship transformation coach. I help women evolve. I help women transform their mindset to develop thriving personal and professional relationships. What I've learned is that relationships are very key. It's a key foundation of how we survive in life or how we live through it. Hey, touch of a woman, how you doing? And I'm convinced that how we manage our relationships is very vital to our overall quality of life. Okay. And so what I wanted to talk about tonight, because I'm going to get right into it, I wanted to talk about when you've been ghosted. I really wanted to talk about it because ghosting has been so common, right? It's just been a common thing in the relationship world now. And it looks as if people just entertain people and then just like disappear. You know what I'm saying? Leaving you with unanswered questions as to why they decided to stop interacting with you. And what happens is when this happens, because I don't think people understand what it does to a person when someone is constantly being ghosted. It causes you to question yourself. It leaves you confused. It leaves you frustrated. It leaves you very disrespected. It creates a pain, right? That's just as intense as a physical pain. Because as I tell people, like your brain doesn't know the difference between a heartbreak or a physical pain. And it also shatters truth within yourself. So you start to not even trust yourself. And it creates the inability to be receptive to other potential future relationships. This is what happens when someone ghosts you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to be honest, and this is my humble opinion right now about ghosting. I think it's very cowardly. There, I said it. I do. I think ghosting can be very cowardly. And I think it's a cop out. I do. I think it's a cop out to not have the decency and the respect to tell someone that they just rather not continue rocking with you, you know, and that's just really my opinion. But even in my opinion, I what I've realized is that it's more about managing people. It's about managing people. It's about understanding people, because everybody just don't function like you. You know what I'm saying? That's something that I realized. Everybody don't function like you. Everybody don't rock from the same principles as you. And this is more about them than you. And the reason why this matters is because when you start to examine things outside of just your values, meaning that when you try to get a level of understanding outside of just your values, you realize that everyone just don't move from that place. Okay. So what I suggest you do tonight, as I talk about this, I want you to take yourself out of it. I do. I want you to take yourself out of it and focus more on the understanding on what I'm about to say tonight. Because the question is always asked, like, well, why somebody just can't keep it 100, Tonya? Why somebody just got to ghost me like that? Why somebody just leave and don't say anything? Because truthfully, it can be quite a few things. That's just the truth. Like, this is not a cookie cutter answer, but this is what I found to be very accurate and very common in people who do this. Right? People who typically don't want to keep it real with you. They don't want to tell you that they don't want to rock with you anymore. It requires them to take ownership. This is why. That's the commonality. When somebody has to come to you and say, man, you know what? I don't think this is going to work. That means that they got to be grown now. This means that they got to take a level of ownership within themselves. And I'm going to be honest with you. That's not as easy and simple as it sounds right now. You know what I mean? And so because ownership requires you to be 100. It requires you to be truthful. It requires you to get uncomfortable because you got to now tell this person that you don't want to be with them anymore. Right? It requires you to be vulnerable, transparent, and authentic. And many people are not willing to do this. Many people are afraid to do it. Right? Which is why I tell you to take yourself out of this because it has more to do with them than you. And as I tell people this too, we live in a broken world. And I need for y'all to understand this. We live in a broken world. And what this means is that, and let me say, when I say a broken world, we all got something we can work on. Like, ain't nobody 100% nothing around here. However, you got people who really just don't care. Right? So when I say we live in a broken world, we also have people in a broken world who really don't care who they hurt. And that's just the facts. And that has something to do with them. It has something to do with some life situations that has caused them to be this way, right? We live in a world where people have difficulty having these conversations. You know what I'm saying? We just do. They don't want to hurt nobody. People would rather walk away than to tell you, because here's the thing. Some people just don't want to hurt your feelings. Some people have their own emotional issues, right? So they have their own emotional issues that they haven't even dealt with yet. So if they got their own issues, then chances are they're not too much concerned about yours because of all their issues that they got going on within, right? They have difficulty committing. You know what I'm saying? People really have a difficult committing. Like, you have people who would rather ghost you because they don't want to get close to you. So they avoid any level of intimacy. Okay. Like, and not to mention that it's easy to do because you don't have to explain yourself. Because people who do this, who feel like they don't have to explain themselves, they think they're getting off the hook. They feel like, you know what? If I don't say nothing, all will be well. This is how they think. You know what I'm saying? Not realizing the mental and emotional space that it puts people in. The person who got ghosted, they don't think about that person, because when you only think of yourself, and not the other person, you don't even see or even recognize that you're actually being selfish. You know what I'm saying? And here's the thing. When I say all this, I'm not saying this to excuse behavior. It's just important to understand these types of things. And so what I wanted to do, I want to give y'all 3 things. Someone on Instagram said that's lame. It is. But what I've learned in my studies and just what I'm paying attention to, that this just has more to do with where they are psychologically. It has a lot to do with just how they function, how they think, and how they see things. And so one thing I wanted to do tonight, I want to give you guys 3 things that you don't need to do. You know what I'm saying? When you've been ghosted. I want to give you 3 things you don't need to do. And I want you to type it down in the chat on Facebook, and I want you to type it down on Instagram. The first thing I want you to not do, okay? I do not take this personal, right? Like, as hard as this is, don't take it personal. I want you to type that down in the chat. All right. Because let me explain something to you. When you take this personal, you start to try to look for something wrong with you. I want you to get this. Like, when you take their ghosting personal, you start to look for something wrong with you. So you're trying to find inadequacies about yourself. Even if it's real or not, you're trying to find something, which turns into self-blame, which turns into a self-destructing behavior about yourself. And what happens is, when you do this, it results in an unnecessary suffering. So now you're causing your own pain. You're creating more pain than what you need to. Okay, because when it comes to self-blame, that's one of the most unhealthiest forms of abuse that you can give to yourself. When you blame yourself, and when you think that what they did got something to do with you, man, you start to blame yourself. You start to self-criticize. You start to think you're the problem. You start to think it's you. You know what I'm saying? So what happens is, when you do this, you're actually taking on a level of ownership on something that's not for you to own. So you're taking ownership for them not showing up. You're taking ownership for them not telling you the truth. That's not your ownership to take. And so when someone ghosts you, to take on that ownership as if it's your fault, it causes you to devalue yourself. Does this make sense? It causes you to devalue you, because you actually think that you were the reason why they did what they did, not realizing that this has more to do with them and where they are within themselves. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, your current interpretation of this situation, that rhymed on it. Okay, look, current interpretation of your situation. I like that. That rhyme, but y'all know I'm crazy. But in all seriousness, though, your current interpretation of what occurred is formed due to a narrative that you're holding about yourself. You know what I mean? And so what happens is, you are interpreting them ghosting you. Like, you're interpreting that for you it causes you to question yourself. It causes you to question your value. And when you take on this responsibility, ladies, you're taking on a responsibility that really isn't yours to take. And when you release yourself from owning what they did, and just own that you need to move forward, then it shifts you in another gear to take care of you. So let me explain something to you. You don't own what they do, but you own the fact that you need to move forward. Those are 2 different types of ownerships, right? So when you own that you need to take care of you, like what he do, what she do, don't make that personal. Don't make it about you. Understand that if I'm going to take some ownership, I'm just going to own the fact that I can't stay where I am mentally. And when you own that part of yourself, you don't make this an attachment to who you are anymore. Like you don't make their actions of ghosting you to define you. That's what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying? Like when you own that you need to take care of you, you don't make this an authority over your value. You know what I mean? Like you don't make this be your unit of measurement anymore. You don't measure your worth based upon how they function. You know what I mean? It's like when you own that you need to take care of you, you realize that their ghosting is more about them than you. You know what I mean? And like when you own that you need to take care of you, you also shift your interpretation of what occurred. Because a lot of times we interpret things based on our belief system. And so if you believe that their ghosting is more about you, then of course you're going to take it personal. But when you change the interpretation and realize that, man, this got more to do with them than me, it changes your belief system and you don't align what they do to define who you are. Give me a thumbs up if this makes sense, because when you don't take it personally, it gives you more power. You know what I'm saying? Like not taking it personally gives you more power. You know what I'm saying? It gives you more power on how you respond. It gives you more power on how you move on from it. It gives you more power over your emotions. And it also changes the way you distribute your energy. Come on now. Like some of y'all can't even function because you're so worried about somebody that what they're doing is more about them. It ain't got nothing to do with you. And I know that's hard. That got to be hard. I get it. Because when somebody leave you and not say anything, it does leave these type of things to wonder. But when you start really getting an understanding that people and how they function has more to do with where they are within themselves, you'll detach yourself from it and realize that this ain't got nothing to do with me. And so I have a question for you. And that question is, are you taking on a level of ownership that isn't for you to own, that's currently keeping you stuck? Right. And that's a real question. You know what I'm saying? Someone on Facebook said, don't take it personal. No, don't take it personal. My friend said she'll get Decatur on them. Y'all, we from Decatur. So that means she'll go crazy. And that's not what we gonna do. But I mean, that type of stuff can make you go crazy, right? Because you feel so disrespected. I think it's more of the principle, right? It is. It's more of the principle. So that's the first thing. Don't take it personal. All right. The second thing, when someone decides that they want to ghost you, the second thing you don't need to do is don't attempt to make it make sense for you. And I want you guys to type that down in the comments. Like, don't make this logical for you. Do not make this logical for you. And I want you guys to type that down on Facebook and on Instagram. Right. Because, you know, the reason why I put this is because as humans, we are wired to know why something occurred. Right. We're wired to wonder. We're wired to search for answers. We want to know what happened. We want to know, well, why did this person do what they did? You know what I mean? We want to know, well, why did they just cut me off? You know, why am I not good enough for at least an explanation? You like, man, I at least deserve that. Right. That's how you thinking. You're wondering, is it somebody else? You're wondering, is this something I did? And what happens is when you're seeking answers for closure like this, when you're seeking answers for closure, when you're seeking answers for understanding, you're looking to be freed from an emotional and mental prison that you're currently in. OK, like, you know, when you want to make this logical for you, you're looking for reasoning and you're looking for someone I'm sorry, for it to be rational for you. You know what I mean? Not to mention, like, not knowing could actually leave you in a place of denial, which really doesn't help with coming into a place of acceptance. So like, you're looking for them to almost set you free. You know what I mean? Because when you want it to make sense, you feel like if it can make sense, then I can accept it. It has to be logical first. And let me explain something to you. When people ghost you, it never makes sense. When you're the person who was ghosted, it would never make sense to you. It would never be rational for you. And so, as long as you're trying to find a rational answer from them, because at this point, you're looking for them to tell you, you want them to really tell you, right? And when you're looking for an answer from them, you're actually being mentally and emotionally in bondage about the situation. You know what I mean? Because you're looking for them to set you free. You believe that they are the key to your healing. They will set you free from how you feel if they just explain to you why they did what they did. So when I tell people, like, don't make this logical, I don't mean to not attempt to form a level of understanding. Like, we want to always have a level of understanding why people do what they do, in a sense, on you functioning to your best performance. But you don't need them to be the person to make it logical for you. You know what I'm saying? So, because what happens is, people who perform these acts are not going to be the ones who give you the reasoning. A lot of the time, if a person decides to give it to you, that means they've came to a level of growth within themselves. However, I wouldn't wait for that to happen for them to set me free, if that makes sense. I wouldn't wait for somebody else to grow up to tell me. That's too much power to give away. And so it's important to not take it personal and just understand that everyone doesn't move the same. And the reason why this part really matters is because you can be so consumed with them owing you a reason that it unknowingly controls you. You know what I mean? Like, it almost takes a level of authority over you that you actually become very obsessed with wanting them to explain themselves. And when you're obsessed with wanting to know from them, it almost as if this is a requirement now for you to be set free, which ultimately gives a lot of power away over you moving forward. You know what I'm saying? Because I want you guys to get this when I say don't make it logical for you, because a lot of us are looking for the person who do it to tell us why they did it. We really want that explanation. And I'm going to tell you something. You're probably not going to get it from them. You can get a level of understanding from me or maybe a therapist on why they did what they did. However, if you think that you need closure and you have to have it from them in order to be set free, you'll probably be waiting for a long time. And let me know if this makes sense, because I know sometimes, we just want people to just be grown and handle things the way we do. But the reality is that they just not. And see, understanding that doesn't mean that it's okay. Understanding is saying, I just know everybody don't rock like I do. That's it. It ain't got nothing to do with saying, okay, you know what? I understand. It's okay. No, it's not okay. It has nothing to do with the fact. This is not about whether it's okay or not. This is about saying, you know what? People function differently, and I don't have any control over that. That is not in my power to control. I can only control how I function. However, the one thing I'm not going to do is allow their inability to be honest with me keep me here. That's why I say don't make this logical for you. Don't try to make it so, I got to know the why. No, you don't. I know you do, but you don't. Not to move forward. Don't give anybody that kind of control over your life. Someone on Instagram said emotionally immature. Absolutely. And what happens is, I said earlier, people who do this don't even know how to manage their own emotions. And when people don't know how to manage their emotions, what make you think they're going to be able to manage how to emotionally be mature enough to tell you the truth? We're looking, that part right there is what we have to get more under control. You know what I mean? And so let me ask you this, and this is just a rhetorical question, because I know sometimes people just don't want to get this part. But let's just say the person does tell you. Let's just say if they come and tell you, will it set you free though? Even if they told you, even if they called you and said, this is why I did what I did. Will it really set you free? Or will you still not understand and have questions? That's what you really got to ask yourself. Like, really, is it really going to help? Or do we just feel like that's what they should do? Right? Because sometimes we want a level of closure, thinking that it will free us from a level of emotional bondage. But emotions don't quite work in that way. You still have to deal with them accordingly, no matter what they do. Now, let me put a disclaimer out here. I'm not saying the way people handle business doesn't matter. right? I believe how you handle business is very important. I do. But see, I was raised differently. So I operate differently. But what I am saying is that don't think in order for you to be released that they need to handle it a certain type of way for you. That's what I'm saying. And so the question is, are you attempting to make this logical for you to move forward? Are you trying to get to a level of reasoning as to why they did what they did? Are you looking for them to set you emotionally free? And if you are, that is too much power to give away. Okay. So that's the second one. Do not make this logical for you. All right. And here's the third one. Here's my last point. I want you guys to type it in the comments. The last thing that you don't need to do when someone has ghosted you is that you don't need to minimize how you feel. All right. I want y'all to type that down in the comments. Don't minimize how you feel. Okay. Because when this happens, we can really downplay how we feel about something, or we can let the influence of other people persuade us to brush it off. And that's not what I recommend. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter how long you were even involved with this person. Because let's just say you all was hitting it off for maybe 3-4 months. You might want to convince yourself that because it hasn't been a long time, that feeling this way just don't add up. Right. But the truth is, when you've been ghosted, it's not technically about the time that was put in. This ain't got nothing to do with time. It was more of the outcome on how it ended. It's the principle. This ain't got nothing to do with time. So if you feel like, man, it ain't even been that long, why am I tripping? Because it's how they handled it. That's why. You know, I mean, especially if you felt like something was going somewhere. I mean, you know, because ghosting can leave you feeling a certain type of way. That's just the reality. It can. And and what happens is we have to identify what that certain kind of way is. When we say I feel some type of way, well, what is it? Is it rejection? Is it confusion? Is it feeling abandoned? Because this is real. This is the stuff that ghosting does to people. Does it cause you to question yourself all day, every day? You know, does it make you want to withdraw and isolate yourself from everybody because you just feel like somebody else is going to do you the same way? And those feelings are just not to be ignored or overlooked. That's my point. Don't overlook that stuff. These are feelings that really need to be confronted with grace and truth. So in other words, you have to have a level of grace over yourself. You know, you have to give yourself a level of compassion, but also be very honest and truthful with how this is impacting you. You know what I'm saying? Because here's the thing. You have to maintenance the care of you as opposed to thinking that pushing through is honorable, right? I'm strong. I'm good. Like I got it. You know, I ain't worried about it. When you know it's quite the opposite. You know what I'm saying? Like for real. And what happens is I find that many of us suppress feelings a lot. We suppress everything. Too much. And constant suppression brings emotional overload. And in order to get through these feelings, you got to face them. You know what I'm saying? So in other words, you may have to get you some therapy or some coaching on demand. That's just the facts. Like to think that people are just going to, you know, see things and act in a way that you do. It's just not realistic a lot in cases. And when you go through things like this, you need to be willing to sort these feelings out, you know, intelligently. You know what I'm saying? And so this is why I always tell people, like you either, you know, you go to a therapist just to kind of flush out your thoughts, get with a coach who can kind of help you sort things through so you can get through this stuff and not keep it so mentally, in your head, right? Not keeping it in your head and in your heart. Like that's a lot of energy that gets consumed. And so what happens is we talk to people who really can't assist us in a way that we need help. And it's important to know that certain conversations need to be off limits to certain people. when you want to move forward. I ain't trying to be funny, but when you really want to get through something, you got to really be careful on who you talk to, right? Who you confide in a sense to move on. Relational management. You know what I'm saying? And I always tell people it's okay to seek help. It's okay to get clarity on it. You know what I mean? Because when you do that, it helps you see things objectively. It gives you the proper tools and it helps you process your thinking intelligently. Because I've had this happen to me a long time ago. I know what this feels like. What I also realized, I actually hired someone to help me flush this out. Cause I didn't know what it was. I was like, why is this bothering me? And I knew why. I felt very rejected. And I was just like, dang. And I took it really personal. You know what I'm saying? I took it personal. I made it about me when in fact it had nothing to do with me. It really didn't. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with how this individual functioned because of their own dysfunction that they aren't dealing with. And what happens is when you don't deal with your dysfunction, it comes in relationships. See, you can't compartmentalize this stuff. This is why I tell people they need to get help. This is why they need to seek some level of assistance. And so the question is, have you minimized how you feel to hold up a facade that you're okay? And that's just a real question that you have to answer for yourself, because you don't have nothing to prove by being strong. You don't owe nobody that. You don't. You really, really don't. And I hope that makes sense, but I want to leave you all with something real quick. I want to add this, because one thing about ghosting, it's not a good feeling to experience. It can suck at times, right? And again, as I said, I think it's very cowardly, and I also think it's the most disrespectful way of handling your business. I really do. But it's also important to remind yourself that them doing this has more to do with them than you. And I know I've said that quite a few times, but I really want you to get that, because when you take it personal, you actually don't think it's about them. You actually think it's about you. Okay. And even though it could have been done differently, let's be real, it could have been done differently. We know that. It's also important to accept that it didn't. And the reason why is because when you can accept how they really function, you actually have an idea on how they handle their business. You know what I'm saying? And it's important to ask yourself, do you want somebody like this in your life anyway? And that's real. Because what this person has displayed to you, they have displayed inconsistency. They have displayed a lack of communication. And they've also displayed how they value the relationship. And so these are things that you have to kind of go a lot more deeper on too. Like, man, do I want somebody like this? You don't. You don't. You want somebody that can talk, can tell you something, communicate with you. You want a level of consistency. You want someone to at least respect you enough to tell you the truth and not just leave you hanging. And if a person is not doing that, then ask yourself, did they probably do you a favor? Even in the midst of them not handling their business better, did they really do me a favor? I'm going to respectfully say yes. And another thing is, don't let how someone else move change you. Seriously, don't let how someone else act determine how you respond. Right? Don't give somebody that kind of power. Like, still keep it classy. Still be that person that even though somebody else isn't going to do it, you still be that person that says, you know what, I don't rock like that. I wouldn't do anybody like that because I know how that feels. Because sometimes we let how other people move make us move in a way that isn't in alignment with our character. And see, you don't never let what somebody else do make you function differently to a point where you don't even know who you are. Well, they did it, I'm going to do it too. Why? Because here's the thing, just because they do it doesn't mean it's right. See, we all have a free will, right? We got free will, but that doesn't mean that free will means you're not held accountable for that doesn't mean you don't have consequences to things. And I think people forget that. Yeah, you can do what you want to do. That's the free will you have, but you're not free from the consequences of the choices you make. So always keep in mind that don't ever change how you function. Like, don't be that person. Like I see a lot of people talk like that, but for what? Just leave them alone and move on, and just realize that everybody just don't move like you, and know that you wouldn't be that person. If they want to continue to be like that, that's on them. They have to deal with them. They are accountable for them, but you are accountable for you. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that part makes sense, because, ghosting can hurt. It does hurt. It leaves you questioning yourself. It leaves you feeling rejected. It leaves you feeling confused. It really does. That's the God honest truth in some cases. However, it's important to know that you are not to take this personal. It's important to know that don't sit here and try to make it logical for you in order for you to move forward. You're basically giving them the key to your freedom. It's not worth it. And don't ever minimize how you feel about it. Deal with it on purpose, because what happens is this type of stuff can scar you, and other people have to pay for something that you didn't heal from. You know what I mean? And I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions? Someone on Facebook said closure is not instant healing. It's not. It's not instant healing. Yes, it would be great if someone was just that 100, but some people just aren't. It doesn't mean it's fair. Life is never fair. And I'm just saying this because we have to know how to understand that people function, like some people just function differently. It can, and trust me, it comes from something. Now, whether or not if they want to see it or not see it is on them. But just know you don't have to deal with it. Just leave them where they are and move on. And what that means is that don't make it personal. Don't attempt to try to make it logical. And also don't minimize how you feel. Right. So I hope that makes sense. Are there any questions or any comments about anything I said? Let me go into the comments on Instagram, because this stuff is real. I see so many people. Someone said holding a narrative already. What's the narrative? What's the narrative? I'm curious on what the narrative is. And also I do have a free guide that helps you overcome rejection, because ghosting can bring a level of rejection. And I put the link in Instagram on my bio. On Facebook, it's in the caption. Not in the caption, but in the title of this live. So feel free to download it. It's a guide that you actually have to do work, to overcome rejection, because rejection is a real feeling. Someone said, how do you know it's not your fault as to why they left? How do you not take that personal? Well, here's the thing. When it comes to that question, I think sometimes you just have to understand how that person function. And again, I don't know, that can be determined in a lot of ways, right? For some people, this is just what they do. They don't, again, I said earlier, some people just don't want to get close to you. Some people avoid a level of intimacy. But the question, I guess the real question is, why would you make it your fault? What did you actually, you can always examine the relationship and look at what occurred. Could it been a way things were said, the way things were handled that may have caused some level of tension in the relationship? We can always be better people, but when someone just decides, hey, I'm not even going to call this person, I'm not even going to text this person, I'm not even going to reach out to this person, then I'm not sure why it would be your fault, unless it's some level of a threat that caused this person to not reach out to you, where it was threatful and harmful to their life, where they felt like not calling you and not reaching out was to protect them. Otherwise than that, then I don't see how that could be any level of it being your fault, that they just wouldn't even communicate how they feel with you. Right? Because if they didn't, if they really don't want to entertain you anymore on that level, then calling you or texting you is not really too much to ask. You have to think there's a lot of lines of communication: social media, email, text messaging, FaceTime. I mean, there's Zoom, right? There's so many different ways that people can communicate with you. And when people choose to not do that, then that says a lot about their character. And the reason why it's important to not take it personal, because a lot of the time what I find is that when people tend to do this, it's more about them. It's more about things that they haven't dealt with within themselves. For some people, this is just how they function. For others, they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to tell you the truth, because telling the truth requires them to take ownership. It requires them to get uncomfortable. What I find is that people have a hard time being vulnerable. And telling somebody that they don't want to be involved with you anymore involves a level of vulnerability. It involves them to be authentic and extremely transparent. And I'm going to tell you something. Everybody's not willing to do that. And so you don't take it personal, in a sense of just understanding that when someone decides to leave with no communication at all, then it might just be how they function. Now, if you're a person that feels like this is always your situation, where you're constantly getting ghosted by everybody you meet, then we may have to take an inventory on some things internally. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes we can be attracting these types of relationships. We could be also we may have an energy to these type of relationships that we're not even aware of. You know what I mean? It's just like when people keep telling me I entertain the same type of person over and over again. Yeah, we have to evaluate that. We have to look into that. But if you was entertaining somebody and this person just said, I'm just not going to reach out, then you have to realize that, it's just important to know that everybody functions differently. Everybody moves differently. Some people don't operate in the same way as you would have. You know what I mean? And to me, that would be one of my best responses to give you. You know what I mean? Like, don't try to find what's wrong with you. Don't be like, man, what did I do? What's wrong with me? It may not have, truthfully, it probably ain't got nothing to do with you. It probably has just everything to do with where they are. You know what I mean? So I hope that brought a level of clarity. But I just, in most cases, this seems to be the issue, that people just don't know how to communicate. They feel like I can do what I want to do. And here's the thing, they actually can. That's the power of having a choice. You can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't make it right, but it lets you know that people can choose how they do things, but that's not in your control to do. No matter what you do, you can't control how they move. You can be the best person they ever met. That doesn't mean that they're not going to do it to you. See, a lot of the times we be like, I did this, I did that. See, here's the thing. You're trying to measure your value based upon why they left or why they decided to stop talking to you. It has nothing to do with that. You could have done everything in your power. That still doesn't mean that they're going to stay. You can't control that part. That's the part that's hard to realize. But when you realize that, man, I can't control how someone functions, then it releases you from blame. It releases you from making it be or thinking it's your fault. So let me know that brings some level of clarity to your question. Are there any other questions about this topic, about ghosting, or anything that you would like to seek a level of understanding about before I close out? Just a reminder that I do have a 7-step guide to overcoming rejection, 7 ways to recover. It's a free guide, and you can click in the link in my bio and it'll be sent to you. Okay, so you can go through it, and you do need a pen because you got to do some work. I'm that kind of coach. It ain't all, sometimes you just got to sit down and do some work, you know what I mean? And just really figure this thing out. So I hope that this actually brought a level of clarity to you to make a decision on what's next for you. Right? Because the most important thing, and one of the things that I do as a coach, is my job is to help you redirect your energy. Right? And that's important, because when we're always thinking about the other person and what they're doing, and this doesn't mean to not have a thought. It's going to happen. You're going to think about it. You're human. But what you don't want to do is make that be your permanent place of residence in your thought pattern, right? You don't want that to be the case. You want to start learning how to redirect on purpose, right? On the things that you need to do. Remember, own taking care of you. Don't own what they do. Own taking care of you, right? Because when you're able to do that, this starts to become a distant memory. You learn how to function moving forward. You realize that I can't take what everybody do so personal. You know what I mean? Because when you make all that personal, man, it's heavy. The weight is heavy. You start to feel like you're the problem on everything, when in reality, that's not always the case. Yes, can we always be better? Absolutely. Do we have some things that are flawed? Absolutely. Right? That's life. That's being human. But do not make and don't believe that how everybody functions has everything to do with you. That's not always true. Okay. So I hope that helps. Make sure you share this. It'll be on both my platforms. I really do appreciate you guys joining. Thank you so much. I Inspired Looks. She said it was very helpful. Thank you. Thank you all on Facebook. I appreciate you. Thank you, IG, for rocking with me. If you have a question or anything you want me to bring to the live, let me know. DM me. Something that you want me to break down for you. I do that from time to time. I don't say your name. I keep everybody's names anonymous, because that ain't how I function, right? But I would love to know if there's something that you're struggling with and you need help with, right? Shoot me a DM, all right? So thank you all again for joining me. Have a wonderful night, and we'll talk soon.